Alright guys, today we're back with another data mine, and this is definitely the most excited I've been for new Azur lane content in the last 4 months. Today we are going to be getting a brand new Italian event, Paradiso of Shackled Light, and with it we will be getting the first Italian UR ship in the game. It will be a capital ship and hopefully will bring up the Sardinia Empire's faction. Also, the theme of this event is going to be Egyptian, which looks awesome by the way. I love the theme that we have going on, and I can't ignore the Yu-Gi-Oh! Easter eggs dropped all over this theme. Atem would be proud. So while an Italian UR Egyptian themed Yu-Gi-Oh! Event seems tailor-made for me specifically, we have a few housekeeping things we have to go over first. I'm going to briefly catch you guys up on some minor updates that happened this February. First, we got augment modules for Colombia and Takao. This basically just gave them some extra firepower stat and barrages. Doesn't make either of them good, but better than they used to be. Also, last week we got a brand new update to the Gear Lab. This was a little larger than I expected it to be, but that's because the patch notes were missing some of the update. This was a massive update to the Gear Lab that brings us a lot of new stuff. One of the things that it brings us is the new Italian faction to the Gear Lab. Ironically enough, this is probably the least significant of the updates. That destroyer gun's not half bad, but the rest of the Italian items are pretty bad. And I don't even imagine the SAP battleship gun here is going to be good because we get a new one in today's event. That's a UR. Additionally, we're going to add PR4 gear to this, which is impressive because that includes the UR Tenrai dive bomber. It's the best dive bomber in the game, and I would expect that every account's going to want at least 4 of these. Also of note from the PR addition to the Gear Lab is going to be the rocket fighter, the BF-109G. That's a good rocket fighter for many players. Those equipment have already been in the game via other various methods. However, we got some brand new, never seen before gear in this Gear Lab update. I'm really only going to talk about the SR and UR equipment here. None of the other gear here are worth your time other than to use as a component to craft up to the next level. So first up, we'll talk about the SR anti-submarine plane from the Royal Navy. This is a really specific niche where it can only be equipped on light carriers and really is only useful against submarines. So really the only time you'll ever be using this is like Unicorn in World 14 or the Chinese boats. So despite its niche though being nearly irrelevant, it's actually pretty good within that niche. It does a lot of damage to submarines, and I would recommend crafting one in case you do need it for submarine warfare in the future. Next up is the SR German fighter FW-190G3R1. This plane has no bombs, rockets, or any way to deal surface damage. It's only an anti-air gun plane. Although, is it crazy at doing that? It's going to beat out the elite version of itself as well as the Shidenkai in anti-air burst damage. Nothing else compares to it. It will be best in the game for that, and one of the best for anti-air DPS too. So if you want to shoot down planes, this is going to be one of the best ways to do it. Of course, you would have to give up your surface damage to get this plane, and you usually don't want to do that. So we're really only talking about situations with very heavy enemy air superiority. Maybe World 15, where we have the support carrier fleet, would be a good option for this. However, it does not have a fast intercept rate of fire, or at least not faster than the Pancake, so many people will probably still use the Pancake fighter. However, this is a good plane to choose. It would be something I would want to keep in my back pocket in case I do need to shoot down planes for a specific reason. It is technically a best in slot plane as far as anti-air burst damage goes. Last but not least for this Gear Lab update, we have a UR anti-air gun. For the record, this gun is awesome. Its burst damage is pretty good. It's actually on par with some of the other top tier anti-air guns. However, most importantly here is it actually gives 15 hit stat. Anti-air guns tend not to be that important, and thus oftentimes the most important thing they can provide you is hit stat, because that can help boost the damage outside of the anti-air environment. Previously, the most you could get off an anti-air gun was 10. This one has 15, and you're not truly compromising on any of the anti-air part of this gun either. Instant add to every battleship that you can. Best in slot, anti-air gun. Use it all the time. Replace your Bofors Stags. Frankly, because it's actually decent of an anti-air gun itself, I might even start putting it on things that I previously was like, okay, I'll make this an anti-air gun ship. Now I'm just like, give it to hit stat. Crafted 3 of these immediately, trying to go to 6 of them pretty soon. Unfortunately, being a UR, there are going to be a lot of materials to do this, but this is a great anti-air gun. Of course, anti-air guns are low on your priority list if you're a new player, but if you're one of the older players and you want to min-max, this is the way to go. All right, lastly, there is a Marco Polo mini event that you should have been able to complete today. This will give you a new elite item for Marco Polo. It basically gives a 3% firepower and evasion boost to all Italian ships when it's equipped by Marco Polo, making her kind of a faction buffer. It's actually a pretty good item. It's just tied to Marco Polo, who's not a good ship. It reminds me of that free prelude event Akagi item we got recently. So with that, I think we're all caught up. Although we did have a live stream this last weekend, which in addition to this event announcement actually gave us a new announcement of private quarters. Anchorage will be the newest addition added to the 3D game mode, and I actually have no idea how I'm going to finish all these ships in private quarters. It takes forever to get these girls leveled up, and they keep adding new ones faster than you can even complete the old ones. I swear we need more than 3 interactions per day across the whole board. Maybe 3 interactions per ship or something else. I don't know. Let me know in the comments how you guys feel about private quarters and leveling up those girls. All right, let's get into today's update finally. It looks like we're going to get a lot of lore with this event. Y'all know I'm not the lore expert here, but I see that new non-playable character art is added to the game with this update. This looks like something called Utopia Savoy. We have another girl named Miss R. They both appear to be human characters, story only. Also, as far as sirens go, we get a new Arbiter. This one based on the major arcana, the Chariot. Just in story for now, no fight yet. Coming with this event, we're going to get new gear skins, and we're going to get a new dorm theme. It is Egyptian themed. It looks really cool to me. And speaking of Egyptian themes, that is going to be our skin theme. We're going to get a bunch of new Egyptian themed skins. A little bit of element of Yu-Gi-Oh going on here, which is really cool for me. I really like the new skins. A lot of motion, a lot of L2Ds, and not a ton of skins, but I think the ones that they brought are high quality. The event itself is pretty typical. The gear drops are slightly interesting to me because it has some of the OG Italian equipment. None of it is particularly amazing, but it does bring them back. The gear shop is good. It is going to have the meta ship in it, and it's going to have the cores like when we typically get a meta ship in the shop. It'll work the same as the last UR German event. In the shop, we will also be getting a UR battleship gun, the 406mm model 1940. And since this gun is the only new equipment in this update, I want to talk about it right now. So being an Italian gun, this is an SAP ammo gun. Like all SAP ammo, its armor modifiers are specifically tailored towards medium armor. Its 160% is the highest medium armor modifier of any battleship gun in the game. The gun itself has a good spread and angle. It is a triple shot, and it has 168 damage per shell, which is very good. Not quite a Yamato gun, but much better than a lot of the going rates for triple guns these days. Its base 24-second reload is pretty standard with triple shot battleship guns. Not super fast, but you probably already have situations that you know how to deal with the timing of a 24-second battleship gun. There is not a single gun in this game that will deal more damage to a medium armor enemy than this new UR gun. It blows out of the water all other current guns in terms of dealing damage to medium armor enemies. It beats the Yamato gun, the Soyuz gun, the Georgia gun. Nothing else compares. That being said, while it specializes in medium armor, it's not very good in the other categories. It's pitiful against heavy armor, and it's okay against light armor. You can use it, especially if you're using it in like Fleet or something where the boss is a medium armor, but there are enemies that are light armor around. It will do fine. This gun is a must pick up gun from this event. Most meta ships are medium armor. Most carriers are medium armor. So there is going to be a lot of late game, end game content in which you need to fight a medium armor opponent. This is the best thing to do. You swap it in. It is niche, but that niche is very wide, and this blows out of the water everything else. Such a good gun to pick up. It's free if you play the event. 10,000 event points is a little bit much, but you should be able to get it pretty easily if you complete the event. All right, with that, let's get into the new event ships. I'm digging right in. I want to go into the UR. This is a UR battleship Raffaello, picking up our second Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle in the game. She's actually the only paper ship in this event. She's based on the UP-41 battleship design, so she's similar to Marco Polo in that way. One could almost call them sisters. So with that, let's get into the stats of this UR ship. She's got heavy armor, however, her health is on the lower end for a UR battleship, more like Bismarck and Alsace, the more squishy UR battleships in the game. Her anti-air and evasion are not much to write home about either. However, that firepower stat definitely is. It's tied for the second highest firepower stat in the game behind only Musashi, and when we pair that with her also being tied for the highest reload stat among any UR battleship in the game, we start to see where a lot of damage can be coming from. Unfortunately, it's not all rosy. Her main gun efficiency is 150% instead of 155% like some of the newer UR battleships. Additionally, she has a pretty low hit stat, so there's a chance that she'll miss and won't crit. Alright, enough of the stats because UR stars are defined by their skills, so let's move on to her skills. And holy crap, are they going with the Yu-Gi-Oh theme. This is so much text. It's like an ancient Egyptian script. A lot to decipher here. Let's get into it. All right, skill number 1, plus 10% firepower stat and hit stat. This is a little disappointing because UR battleships tend to get higher boosts than this. Musashi gets a 20% firepower boost, and as far back as New Jersey got a 15% firepower boost. So although this ship had one of the highest base firepowers, her skill already gives her a lower boost to balance out that higher firepower. The extra hit stat is nice. Typically we see 5% boosts in hit stat. She gets 10, but she already had a low hit stat to begin with, so that just corrects for that as well. Next, when any main fleet ships slot one weapon or a lead vanguard ship's slot one weapon hit an enemy, there's a 50% chance to inflict the enemy with one stack of black pigment. Each individual weapon can inflict one stack every 5 seconds. The black pigments have a maximum of 3 stacks. Each stack lasts for 10 seconds and are counted independently. Each stack reduces the enemy's speed by 5%, max 15%. When an enemy reaches 3 stacks of black pigment, that enemy takes 6% more damage from an allied ship, and an additional new stack of 6% additional damage that comes from Italian ships for 10 seconds. Okay, whoa, there's a lot to unpack here. First things first, these are independent stacks of injury damage. If you don't know how those work from the Wikipedia, basically it means they're going to be able to stack on top of each other. It's a good thing. It also means that the injury stacks are tied to the ship that is taking the damage, not boosting your ships. This can affect how certain buffs interact with them. So first things first, any main fleet ship, so that's in the back row. That includes your carriers and your battleships. Slot 1 is usually going to be your main battleship gun, but it also, for carriers, is probably going to be your fighter planes. If you have a universal carrier slot, then you could change that out, but it's typically going to be your fighter planes. This only applies to the first Vanguard ship, so it doesn't apply to the back ones, but because it says lead Vanguard, if your first Vanguard ship dies, then the next ship up becomes your lead Vanguard. So you'll always basically have a lead Vanguard ship, because if one dies, you'll get the next one up. And if they all die, then you just lose the battle. I'm a little sad about this 50% chance to inflict because it's mostly based on the main fleets. So 50% chance seems like a very low percentage, and I don't see any way to increase that percentage. So it's going to be hard to get these stacks on there, given your main fleet might be only firing every 15 to 20 seconds. The cooldowns apply to the weapon that fires, not to the ship. And that is also very annoying because basically if you fire and create a stack, all of your additional fires the next 5 seconds don't work. So, as far as the main fleet, you basically have to wait for a full reload. And for your Vanguard fleet, which is most applicable, that's also annoying because you can't, use a main gun +1 to get all these extra ones. This is going to be important if you use her in like a mob fleet and your Vanguard ship is going to put the stack on like a suicide boat. The suicide boat dies. It actually loses the stack because, like we said, this is an injury stack. So it applies to the ship that you're actually giving the stack. You're not like stacking them on herself. It's stacking on the ship you deal it to. That ship dies, it loses the stack. And so you're going to have issues there because you still have the 5-second cooldown, which is applied to your weapon. So you'll put the stack on the suicide boat. The suicide boat will die. You'll lose the stack, but you still have the 5-second cooldown that you can't apply it to, for example, the boss. So that's annoying. Additionally, because it's a lead Vanguard ship, you are probably going to want your tank to be the lead Vanguard ship. But for this sort of thing, you probably actually want a main gun +1 destroyer because that can give you a very fast firing gun. And that gun, will have a main gun +1 if you're on the right destroyer. An example would be like Attilio Regulo, which is an Italian destroyer, which will get that extra 6% damage boost from the second part of this skill. So that would be a really good option, but you typically don't want her to be the lead Vanguard because she's not super tanky. You'd want to put her in the middle or in the back. So that also kind of, I don't know. I don't really like how this is going to be working. Also, 3 stacks seems like it's going to be hard to obtain because they only count for 10 seconds and they have a 5-second cooldown between each stack. So it's going to be hard. You're basically going to have to get them all lined up with your main fleet. And unfortunately, this actually kind of gets hurt by the fact that Raffaello has such a good reload because she's probably going to fire first. Okay, this skill is, there's a lot going on here, and a lot of it tends to not benefit her specifically. But in the essence of time, let's move on to skill number 2 and see how any of these things synergize with each other. All right, skill number 2, I already don't like it. Negative 25% firepower damage taken. I was so excited because 25% damage taken reduction is good and would help with her survivability, but it's only against firepower damage, so torpedoes and planes will be able to deal damage at full impact. This is kind of crazy how it goes against the theme, because Italians are known in the game for having anti-torpedo damage stacks, and she literally is going to be taking full damage from torpedoes. Negative 25% is a nice chunk. This is going to be good if you're fighting against a bunch of battleships, for example, but because it's locked to only 1/3 of the damage basically you could take potentially, it's significantly worse than something like a Musashi debuff, which for the record is a negative 30% damage reduction across all types of damage. All right, still in skill number 2, when any allied ship takes 20% of its max HP in damage, that allied ship gains a stack of white pigment. So now we have white and black here. When an allied ship defeats an enemy with black pigment from the skill number 1, that ship gets a white pigment. So in that situation I talked about before, where you kill a suicide boat and you gave it the stack, the compensation that you get for losing the black pigment stack is that you get a white pigment stack here. All right, just like black pigments, white pigments have 3 maximum stacks and they last for only 10 seconds. While Raffaello is afloat, each stack of the white pigment gives the ship 1% of Raphael's HP as a barrier for 10 seconds. The subsequent stacks refresh the barrier, but they do not stack the barrier's HP. When any allied ship reaches 3 stacks of white pigment, Raffaello is going to gain a stack of white pigment, so she can get these white pigments from other people nice and easily. That allied ship is going to get plus 6% damage dealt. If it is a Italian ship, then it's going to get a plus 12% damage dealt. These will also stack with the top skill. So theoretically, an Italian ship, if it gets all 6 stacks, 3 of each color, could get a damage boost of 24%. Mind you, we're getting these stacks when we take 20% damage, which is a lot. I mean, technically you can only do that 5 times without heals, and they only last 10 seconds. So it is kind of hard. We do get some from Raffaello if other people take the damage, and we do get it if we kill something with a black pigment. But once again, it's going to be kind of hard to stack 3 white pigments for a long time because they come off pretty quickly and they're hard to get to begin with. The theoretical upside of these white and black pigments are fantastic. The actual practicality of getting them to stack and getting them to be timed properly is going to be very difficult, because even if you do get them to stack, it's not going to necessarily be done when you need it. But 1% Raphael's HP is kind of nice because she is a UR battleship, and although comparatively she has lower HP than the other UR battleships still have the highest HP of any type of ship in the game, so those barriers could actually be pretty impactful on the Vanguard here. Presumably your lead Vanguard ship from the first skill is going to be getting a lot of these white stacks, and that will give them shields to help protect them. Another side note about these white pigments is they apply to all ships in your fleet, including the submarine fleet. So if your submarine fleet is taking damage, they can get those white pigments and transfer them to Raffaello. All right, almost there. We have a third skill here with just as much text. When this ship fires her main gun, she triggers a special barrage. We see the fun black and white theme here. It has good coverage, but it appears to be a lot of different variations of the damage you can do based on all of the following. If an allied ship has a white pigment on it, heal the lowest HP ship in the fleet by 2% of Raphael's HP. If you have 3 stacks in your fleet, this triggers 3 additional times for a total of 4 times for a total of 8% of Raphael's HP spread across the lowest HP units in your fleet at the time. This is a fantastic battleship heal, probably the best in the game, I think. You're rarely going to get those 3 white pigment stacks, but you will get the other one pretty easily, and it's a heal. It's a good heal. So white pigments give you shields, and then they give you heals when she fires her main guns. If an enemy unit has black pigment stack, she gets plus 50% barrage crit rate, and it improves the barrage pattern by a lot. If they have 3 stacks, you get an additional 20% crit damage and an additional improvement to the barrage. This barrage has crazy amounts of damage if you have 3 stacks of black pigment. Once again, this is going to be kind of hard to get and keep and line it up with when she fires her main guns. But if you can pull it off, it does have a payoff. Getting a fully enhanced barrage does 133% more damage on top of getting 50% increase to crit rate, so we don't care about hit stat being low anymore, and then 20% damage on top of that if it crits. So a lot of damage off that barrage. The barrage also has priority aim, so it's more likely to hit, and there's so many good things about this barrage if you can get those stacks. More nuance here. This is only looking at the highest stack target per activation. So for example, those black pigment stacks actually apply to the enemy. So we're looking at any enemy and seeing which one has the most stacks. So if they have 3 enemies, but each one has only 1 stack, that counts as 1 stack. But if you have 1 enemy with 3 stacks, that's 3 stacks. So just keep that in mind. Same thing with the white pigments. You can have multiple white pigments. So if you have, 2 white pigments on one ship and then 1 white pigment on the other, you're only stack of 2. You don't have a stack of 3. Once again, making it more difficult to get these stacks and these boosts that we're talking about. All right, finally, the second part of this skill. When this ship is afloat, when another fleet enters the battle, 20 seconds after the start of the battle, trigger a special barrage. This is basically just her base barrage without any of the stacks. Also, if it's the first, second, or third battle of that fleet, heal all ships in that fleet by 2% of Raffaello's max HP at the end of the battle. This is a cross-fleet heal. It is a impressive cross-fleet heal. It doesn't do it at the start, but it's really good. So if you can have her be in a boss fleet and heal the mob fleet for the first 3 battles, that's amazing. This is also amazing for Operation Siren. This is a really good cross-fleet barrage because she has a good cross-fleet barrage to begin with, and then on top of that, it has a really good heal on it. So honestly, the most exciting part that I've seen about this ship is actually her cross-fleet. Her cross-fleet is really good and makes her kind of a must pick up because I don't think there's another ship that does that better. She also's got a really good heal as far as being a battleship heal. A lot of the heals in the game are light carrier specific, and so it's kind of rare to have it on a battleship, which tend to do a little bit more damage in certain areas, so that could be very useful and specific. Man, there's a lot going on with these skills. I spent way too much time on this ship. In the end, I think this ship is very complex, and a lot of times the complexities are not helping this ship actually improve. There's a lot of things going on here that can just go wrong, and it feels less like, oh, I can put together this perfect synergy to make it amazing, and more like, this is RNG and hope it works, and if it does, it just goes crazy good, and if it doesn't, then it's just like a normal ship. So I don't know, there's a lot going on here. The slow is not very, there is a slow on this, I've almost forgot about that, but the slow is not very much, and like I said, we get some really good support buff damage here. Those 6% are really good, but like I said, it's when they get 3 stacks, so that's hard. The shields are pretty solid. There's a lot. She's got everything. She's got a slow, she's got a heal, she's got a shield, she's got crit, she's got all of it, but you have to get those stacks, and they're not easy to get because, once again, 5-second cooldowns. Once again, they go away after 10 seconds. Once again, they are applied to a specific ship, so like if you apply 3 different ones, they don't stack, and the cooldown is to the weapon, the actual stack is to the ship, so that doesn't work out very well. And like I said, it's only the slot weapon ones for the lead vanguard only and the main fleet. So if you want to have like a main gun +1 destroyer going crazy, you got to put it in the front and risk it dying or not get any of the benefit there. So I don't know, a little bit of a disappointment, but this ship's going to be pretty good, and like I said, with those cross fleets and those heals, it's definitely something you want to pick up for certain game modes. Not PvP relevant at all, so we didn't hit that part of my wish list, but that's okay. I still think it's an exciting ship, and we'll see play. It's not tied to the Italians really by anything. It's not tied to SAP by anything, so it is very flexible by that means, so you can use it where you need it. Most likely it's going to be on the side of ops side to help give you heals as you go through. It's kind of hard to see if she should be a mob fleet or not, because if she's a mob fleet, she's going to struggle with getting those black stacks because things are going to die too quickly. But if she's not, then she's going to have other issues. She's a boss fleet, she can heal the mob fleet, so that's nice. So I'm kind of leaning towards her being in the boss fleet, but she's not like a perfect damage debuff person for that. But I think you can get a decent amount of black black pigment stacks on a boss, and her survivability looks a little bit better with those white pigments, but I don't know, not like power corrupt by any means, but certainly a side grade and gives us some niche things that have never been done before. In fact, the whole like everything seems pretty much new. Anyway, I'll stop rambling about this ship because there are other ships in this data mine that we have to go over. Next up, we have an SR submarine. It's been a while since we've got an SR submarine. This is Maggiore Baracca. She's going to be the sister to Leonardo da Vinci. All right, stat-wise, she looks a little bit disappointing. Despite being Leonardo da Vinci's sister, she's worse in most ways. She got the same reload, but lower hit stat, lower torpedo stat, lower firepower stat. So we really don't like that. Yeah, as far as stats go, I'm pretty sure Leonardo da Vinci is strictly better. So let's see what the skills go and change here. All right, skill number 1, she's going to get a flat plus 10% hit stat and plus 10% torpedo crit damage. Those are nice. As far as her torpedo stat increases, those are going to come a little bit differently. When the ship fires her torpedo, there's a 30% chance to increase the torpedo stat by 3%. Every 4 seconds increases this torpedo stat by 3%. And when the ship takes damage, 30% chance to increase this torpedoes by 3%. This has a max of 7 stacks. Man, what is with this update with ships getting just crazy stacks? Okay, we can stack 7 times. So potentially we get a 21% boost to our torpedo stat. So that's nice. It's actually better than what Leonardo da Vinci does. So that helps make up for that. It's shared between all 3 methods. So worst case scenario, all 7 of your stacks have to come from the every 4 seconds part of this, which is guaranteed. So 28 seconds in, you will get to full stacks. However, if she fires and takes damage, you can trigger that quicker. When the ship reaches 7 stacks, she triggers a special barrage. This special barrage is a torpedo barrage, but it's not all that impressive. That being said, you do get a 21% torpedo stat boost for the rest of the fight. Of course, being a submarine means that she's going to retreat prior to the end of the fight, most likely, if you don't have enough oxygen, so it's not as good as you think, but this is pretty decent if you can get those stacks coming up quickly, but there's not really a way to get her to do it. It's just chance, right? 30% chance, hope you proc them, and if not, you just wait longer. It's decent. It definitely plays on more unnecessary stacks that this event is going for. Yeah, anyway, moving on to skill number 2. She gets plus 5% damage dealt. We like that. It's flat, it's across the board, it's easy, it's simple. When this ship falls below 80% HP, she's going to get an additional 5% damage dealt until the end of the battle. So realistically, if she surfaces and takes a little bit of damage, she's going to very quickly be doing 10% damage dealt. Once again, being a submarine means she's going to be hidden and, you know, under the sea for most of the battle, so she's going to be sticking at that 5% damage dealt for most of the time, but it is an extra damage boost. Great. 80% is pretty high, so you can trigger this easy enough, but it will only be for a very short time because it will be as she's retreating, basically. Every 5 seconds after this ship enters the battle, if this ship is above 30% HP, consume 3% of the max HP and trigger a special barrage. The barrage from this skill is surprisingly worse than the barrage from the first skill. It is like a bullet barrage that has priority aim. It's interesting, but okay, not a big factor that we're trying to hit this. I guess that makes sense because this is basically going to be triggering every 5 seconds. This is a barrage that triggers every 5 seconds. So in perspective, because it's triggering so often, this will add up because you're going to be over 30% HP a ton. You got to be careful though about like killing your subs here because subs don't have a lot of HP. She's like under 2,000. This is interesting because it could technically help contribute towards getting that below 80% HP for the first part of this. However, it triggers every 5 seconds, and if you are taking no damage from anything else because she's under the sea, you're going to have to wait like 35 seconds to get under 80%, which is, you know, most of the time a sub is actually deployed in combat, so not a huge deal there. I don't know, whatever, she's damaging herself. When the ship falls below 30% HP and takes damage, heal 25% max HP and get plus 25% evasion rate for 10 seconds, max 1 trigger. This just helps her survive, I guess, so that last squishy part will be a little bit more survivability, not particularly amazing. This sub is kind of, I mean, I guess there's a third skill, so I should probably read that before I make my thing. Third skill, she gets plus 20 oxygen. If this is included in your submarine fleet, then you can provide battle outside of your hunting range once per sortie. So this is pretty much the same as Leonardo da Vinci's skill. Not very useful. The benefit here is the 20 oxygen allows you to not have to use like a snorkel, so you can give her extra auxiliary items that are torpedo focused. So I guess that is kind of good. The using outside the range is not a big deal. I think her range looks like a shield, which is kind of cool. But yeah, and then she gets an all-out assault trigger. destroyer. That's pretty standard with all subs. So this is a pretty, I don't know, forgettable submarine. I don't know. I would say Leonardo da Vinci is better. There's not any synergy between her and Leonardo da Vinci. They're completely separate, so there's no reason to even run them together. I mean, you can. This sub is less exciting than I thought. I was hoping she would, like, you know, buff her sister or have some synergy with her sister, but she really doesn't. She's just like a damage dealing sub. She's got more crazy stacks, and yeah, she's not bad by any means. So if you don't have an SR sub and you need one, she'll do the trick. She'll add that DPS that you need. As with all subs, it's pay oil to get extra DPS. All right, let's stick with the SRs. We have Andrea Doria Meta. This is going to be the ship that's droppable as well as purchasable in the shop. As with these meta ships, because you can't use bullens for them, make sure that you get all of their gems or cores or whatever before the event ends, because if you ever want to max limit break them, keep that in mind. So given that this is a meta ship based on the original ship, we're going to breeze through these stats really quickly. She does get an upgrade because her original was an elite and she's now an SR, so she's basically better stat-wise across the board. There's not really anything that she is inferior in. All right, skill number 1. When she fires her main gun, she triggers a special barrage. Enemies hit by this barrage get minus 15% hit stat for 8 seconds. That's kind of a peculiar debuff, but all around the barrage here is pretty solid. It looks good, and surprisingly, it's one of the few barrages that is affected by reduced bullet spread. Got priority aim on the others, and it has a good spread with that fire splash that comes out with HE ammo and can set things on fire. And yeah, I mean, it's a good barrage. It's solid. It's guaranteed. When an enemy crosses the carrier detection line, that enemy receives 20% more damage, and you trigger another one of these barrages. So that is really cool. This is really good against like ships in a mob fleet, because this is a good barrage. You get to trigger this barrage if it comes across. 20% more damage is a lot. Like, this actually is pretty solid as far as like making sure that you kind of protect your backline. So yeah, and especially since she's got like 3 shot for her auxiliary gun, the CL or a DD gun. She can do a light cruiser or a destroyer gun, and with 3 shots there, she has a lot of that auxiliary firepower there, so that works really nicely here. So she's pretty good at, you know, just off this first skill with a really solid barrage and, you know, some of that, she's gonna be pretty good about protecting your backline from like suicide boats and such. All right, skill number 2, plus 15% firepower and hit stat. We like that. I don't know why we couldn't just get that on the UR ship. Great. When the ship fires her main guns, self crit rate goes up by 12%, and the Vanguard fleet gets minus 20% damage taken for 5 seconds. Oh man, this is a barrage battleship. That's for certain. She has a really good barrage in the first thing. She's got a really good buff here. Minus 20% damage taken. That's actually really solid here as a support there. Crit rate's always nice too for her, especially since she's going to get that crit rate as she's firing that special barrage. So we can, you know, apply that to that barrage even better. At the start of the battle, if there are any other meta ships in the fleet, she gets plus 10% damage dealt. That's really fun for synergy with meta ships if you want to make a meta fleet that way. We like that, especially since her base version was a buffer for the Italian faction. Now it seems like she has a lot of support functions, but she also gets buffed in being in the meta faction after, you know, she changes. So we like this skill too. Really simple. Okay, going to skill number 3. Decreases the first 4 instances of damage taken by 60% each battle. So this kind of reminds me of when you put the scroll on one of the Russian ships, the fairy tale thing. This doesn't turn it to 1. It just reduces by 60%, but it's pretty good. She is a battleship, so, you know, she can reduce a lot of damage this way because she's probably taking either like a salvo hit or a torpedo that can deal a lot of damage. So she gets to reduce that by 60%. That'll help with her survivability, given her HP is a little low for a battleship. You know, that's power creep, but that's not bad. We like it. 60%, that means you can kind of blow through it, for example, if the enemy can deal a ton of damage, but, you know, it's nice. It'll help survivability. When the ship is under 40% HP and takes damage, she heals 20% of her max HP and gets minus 10% damage taken for the rest of the battle. It triggers once per battle. That's pretty nice. 20% heal is great. So in addition to the damage reduction rate at the start of the battle, if you get long into a battle, she gets a nice good heal. So just a very survivable skill. We like that. Of course, her being in the back line, usually not as much of a problem. And given the fact that her first skill and all that stuff, nothing should be getting to the back line. Like, she will really protect your carriers. And then being a meta ship, she actually gets her 4th skill, which gives her a bonus in OpSci of 8% damage dealt. So this is actually really just solid across the board ship. There's nothing I dislike about this. They built this pretty well. It's not like amazing because it's, you know, working on low stats. We're kind of dealing with the power creep there. But, you know, this ship will get you through a ton of content, like all the way through up to World 13. So if like you're a new new player, this is a great ship to take over. And like I said, it will protect a lot of your backline. So if you're like carrier heavy, because I feel like a lot of people are carrier heavy early in the game, at least back when I was a new player, that was definitely the case. This would protect those very easily. And there's a lot of things to like about this ship. This is a great barrage battleship. And yeah, it's not better than the UR, and whatever. But if we're comparing it to its like rarity, this is a great SR battleship, whereas the UR is kind of like a mediocre UR battleship. But a mediocre UR battleship is still better than a great SR battleship, so just keep that in mind. But overall, I like the kit of this a lot as far as like a meta ship goes. So with that, we're done with the SRs, but we got 2 elites left. First up, we got the elite light cruiser Bartolomeo Colleoni. Butchered that, but we got a cool real ship that actually has a cool design. Kind of looks like a younger Vittorio Veneto to me, but stat-wise, oh my. She certainly is a forgettable elite status for her stats. I don't know, compare her to Notori, which is a completely forgettable ship, so not good for stats. So let's go into the skills. Of course, she's got a great art design, so why would she have good stats? Skill number 1, minus 15% damage taken. She's going to need it. It's nice, though. She's going to need it, though. For the first 30 seconds of the battle, plus 10% Vanguard fleet damage. Oh my gosh. At the end of this effect, grant all Vanguard fleet a max 3% HP barrier that lasts until it's destroyed or the end of the battle. Okay, so this is like a mini Aurora. Awesome. I mean, fleet damage, I believe this is probably going to stack with Aurora. Like, you can make like Unzen get some crazy numbers with this in Aurora. Fun. We like it instantly. Forget everything I said about the stats being crap. I like this. Yay. And a barrier. The barrier is solid. I mean, hey, it lasts until it's gone. So that's really neat. Great skill. Everything about that skill is amazing. Okay, moving on to skill number 2. Plus 15% firepower, torpedo, and evasion stat. She needs all the stats she can get, so she's going to get them from her skills. When the ship fires her torpedoes, there's a 70% chance to trigger a barrage. Okay, 70%. It's an elite ship. Whatever. It's not guaranteed. The barrage itself is very solid. It's got torpedoes. It's got a good chunk of damage. It's got a slash in it, and that slash ignores enemy shields. So we kind of like this barrage. It's not guaranteed, so got to keep that in mind. But barrage, it's good. Like, I would be happy of this barrage on an SR ship. This is on an elite ship, so we're going to be very happy about it. Like I said, not guaranteed, but still good. And then finally, she ends it with an all-out assault. This ship is cool. I really like this ship. I mean, the stats are pitiful, right? No getting around that. But that first skill means that we could potentially use her, especially if you don't have an Aurora. It stacks with Aurora. Yeah, I like this ship. I mean, you can't have all supports, and technically Aurora is still a much better support, but she tries to do that. So she has a purpose, and I kind of like that. All right, last but not least, but probably least, is going to be the Elite Destroyer that we collect from accumulation of event points. Elite Destroyer stats be Elite Destroyer stats. Moving on. Skill number 1. When this ship fires her torpedoes, there's a 70% chance to trigger a special barrage. Enemies hit by this barrage are going to be burned for 9 seconds. That burn damage scales off her torpedo stat, and all enemy ships are going to get plus 5% damage dealt for 6 seconds. So it is a universal damage boost if it triggers. If the effect fails to trigger, then it is guaranteed to trigger on the next firing. So it is based on torpedoes though, so those are a little bit slower to fire. But yeah, you could give her like really quick torpedoes and you could get those extra boosts. But you could also just use the light cruiser we just talked about to give plus 10% damage boost flat. I guess technically this applies to all ships, so this does apply to the back row. That is kind of interesting, especially if you're using this with like carriers, because that firing torpedoes is probably going to be right around when you have your carriers load up for the first time. So anyway, it's interesting. It is guaranteed. The fun part is she has a preload, so if she fails to trigger on the preload, she's going to guarantee the trigger on the second one, which will probably come, between 16 and 20 some seconds. And that'll be really nice if you have carriers, so you can guarantee that. So it's fun. Of course, if she does trigger it on the first preload, then you're not guaranteed the second time. So it's kind of fun. You're going to be like, please don't trigger the first time. Anyway, moving on to skill number 2. For every 9 instances of damage taken, trigger a special barrage. Additionally, all Vanguard fleet gets plus 10% evasion, plus 3 speed for 9 seconds. Damage instances counting only restarts when this effect ends. So basically, she'll be able to trigger off of this pretty easily, actually. 9 instances of damage is not going to be too difficult. It seems to stack and stay forever until the steel resets. Why couldn't the UR have triggers that stuck around like this? That would make that a lot better. Anyway, the first time this effect is triggered, all of the Vanguard heals for 3% of of max HP. So she's got a heal too. All right, this has also got things. And then she's got an all-out assault at 10 shots. Because of her being a destroyer, though, she gets to half that when she gets to max limit break 3. So she'll actually have a lot of barrages. If we're looking at all of her barrages, she's got 3 of them in total, and they're actually not that bad. They have special burn on some, they ignore shields on the others, there's priority aim, and we ignore bomb collisions, and they split into fragments, and there's some good stuff here. I mean, this ship's not amazing, but pretty good. So anyway, that covers all of the Italians. This is a long video, but mostly because that UR just had a lot to unpack. And frankly, all of the ships that don't have green hair, I like their kits, and the 2 ships with green hair that I was very excited for kind of got boring. Not really boring. Okay, there's no way I can say that Raffaello is boring. I'm really just talking about Baracca was boring. Raffaello was just like unnecessarily complicated. And like I said, you add all this complexity and all these things that, you know, you're reading a Yu-Gi-Oh card for her skills, which is fine. But it's not like, oh, I can like change things to make this better or create synergies or just things that be good. Most of the complexity actually like kind of hurts what she's trying to be doing. And that's basically like she needs to have all these stacks on all the time, and they're hard to get on, and they come off quickly. And every little thing that we look into is like, oh, that could have been good, but because of the way that it functions will be a little bit more difficult. I don't know. She's got a cross-fleet heal. It's really good. She's got a heal on a battleship, which is the best in the game probably at this point. So you'll see play for her for those things. And if she triggers all of the pigments when you use her, you'll be super happy. But a lot of the time she'll just be like an average UR battleship, which for the record, average UR battleship, still very good. Yeah, I was hoping for something a little bit different for her, but I can't say that she's bad. That's for sure. She's just kind of mediocre for her tier, which is still top tier. You should still pull for her. We will not have another UR event likely until May, which will probably be a really good UR because it's a Chinese anniversary. But you should probably pull for her, especially if you're a new player. Her cross fleet is probably not coming back in a similar form anytime soon. Could be wrong on that, but I'm guessing that's going to be pretty unique to her. And you know, a battleship heal is cool. So I don't know. I like her art. I like her design, but her kit seems a little bit overly complex. It was not exactly how I was envisioning it, but it is what it is. I'm definitely going to pull for her. I'm excited for this event still, but definitely the most important thing for you to pick up during this event is going to be that UR SAP battleship gun. That is going to allow you to dominate and kill medium armor enemies. Of course, Raffaello's cross-fleet heal is something you're going to also want to pick up. The other 4 ships are technically collection only. They're not bad. You can use them. They're all very usable, but they're primarily not going to be meta, and you're only going to use them until you find better upgrades, and there are better upgrades for each of them in the game already. Okay, I'm going to be streaming this event later today. We're going to go right into it, so if you do want to watch me do my polls, or if you want to go through the event with me, I would love that. I'm doing the stream later today, so make sure to remind yourself to come and join if you're available. Thank you guys for watching this data mine. Hopefully it helped you out. There's a lot to unpack. Sorry it's a long video. I'll see you guys next time. Enjoy your day. Take care.